Hey, welcome to Bethel Online. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you're watching us today, it's by no accident. We believe that God has something just for you. Here at Bethel, we believe that when real people like you and me, encounter the real Jesus, real change happens. So our hope and prayer for you is that you have an encounter with Jesus today. We also believe that God has a next step for all of us to take. Today, your step may just be watching this week's message. It could be asking God to forgive you and finally putting your hope and trust and faith in Jesus for the first time. Maybe it's being baptized or beginning to read through the Bible, whatever it is. We want to help you take that next step. You can let us know what step you're taking by texting the word ONLINE to 765-433-2004. We would love to walk with you. During this season, God is teaching us to be flexible. It seems like every week there's a new challenge and more changes. A great way to stay up to date on all the changes that's happening at Bethel is to follow us on social media. It's also a great way to listen to current and past Sunday morning messages. Like us on Facebook, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and follow us on Instagram. You can find us on all these platforms by searching Bethel Putco. Well, thanks again for tuning in online today. We want you to know that you are wanted, you are welcomed here, and that you are loved. I hope you have a great day. God bless.
Hey, what's happening, Bethel? Hey, we're in a series right now called Encounters, and this is a series that will go here for a couple weeks, and then we're going to take a break and go through another series. But at Bethel, we say something, and we don't just say it because it sounds cool. We say it because we believe it. When you look at the Scripture, when you look at the Word of God in the New Testament, when Jesus was here, sent from God to walk this earth with people like you and I, when people encounter Him, something happens to them. They experience transformation. That a connection with Jesus always turns into a life-changing experience. And it's crazy because many of the experiences that are listed in Scripture are ones that people didn't think would happen. Today we're going to talk about an encounter that Jesus has with a woman at the well. Everyone needs water. Our physical bodies need water. I mean, when we don't have it, we thirst for it. We want it. But we find a woman today that is meeting her daily need of water, and a Jesus who meets her where she's getting her water and reminds her that that water will not fill her soul. In John chapter 4, and we're going to go through a lot of Scripture today, but in John chapter 4, verses 1 through 44, there's a story that is filled with some incredible insight into who Jesus was and how He encountered people who were obviously broken. It says, now Jesus learned that the Pharisees had heard that He was gaining and baptizing more people than John. Although in fact it was not Jesus who baptized, but His disciples. Now, this is a little bit of a precursor to the story and tells us a little bit about what had been going on. Jesus was beginning His ministry. He was going about, and there was this group called the Pharisees, and they didn't fully understand what Jesus was doing. And they were often looking at Him critically, trying to decide whether or not what He was doing was right. And was He doing the things they thought He should or not? And they were trying to determine whether or not Jesus was worthy of His position or not. So Jesus has heard that there are haters. He's going about His Father's work. He's carrying out in the most perfect way His Father's love for the world. And there are people who are gossiping, basically, making things up about what he's doing. And they're saying that he's baptizing people. And baptism wasn't a new thing to Jesus. John the Baptist had been doing it. There were other teachers in the day that would baptize people to show the washing away of sins. But Jesus is actually having his disciples do the baptizing. So some people who hadn't really ever encountered Jesus are talking about what Jesus is doing. So he left Judea. He leaves the place where he's at, where the talkers are talking and the haters are hating and the players are playing. And he goes to Judea. It leaves Judea and goes back to Galilee. Now, the route from Judea to Galilee was really not a roundabout way, but there was a town of Samaria close by. The scripture says in verse 4 that he had to go through Samaria, but if you look at a map, you will find that going through Samaria was not a straight route. Jesus could have taken a route, and most Jewish leaders of the day, including the Pharisees, would not have taken the route through Samaria because the Jewish people were prejudiced against the Samaritan people. They couldn't agree on anything, and so there was a battle, an argument, and they just would not have anything to do with each other. So the fact that Jesus goes through Samaria shows us that while the religious people weren't willing to go to a place they disagreed with, that Jesus was willing to go anywhere to carry out God's will. So he came to a town in Samaria called Sychar, near the plot of ground Jacob had given his son Joseph. And Jacob's well was there. Jacob's well was historically a well where the people had gotten their daily water. Water in this area is precious. It's hard to find. A well that was a good well that produced water was a place where people would go. And the women of the day would go and get the water for their home. And they would carry these large pots. And they would carry them and fill them with water early in the morning before the heat of the sun, while the water was still cool and while the travel was cool, and the water would be cool, and they would take it back to where they lived and they would use it for whatever needs they had, to drink, to cleanse, and they would take this water. And this was a well that was notorious for having good water. Jesus was tired from the journey. Isn't it good to know that even the Son of God, when living here on earth, experienced being tired? So he sat down by the well, and it was about noon. Now, this wasn't a typical time to come to the well. Most people did it in the morning time, but Jesus comes to the well at about noon, and he sits down. It says a Samaritan woman came to draw water. Now, this is problematic for Jesus on several levels. His disciples have gone to get food, so he's alone. No rabbi in his day would have listened to or spoken to a woman in their day, because the Jewish religious people of the day were not just prejudiced to the Samaritans, they were prejudiced to women. So when Jesus speaks to this woman, he asks her to give him a drink, and he's doing what the religious people in the day say is unacceptable. I love that Jesus didn't just come to encounter men, and Jesus didn't just come to encounter people who looked like him. Jesus encountered people who were nothing like him. And Jesus was unafraid. See, the Jewish law had often kept a thumb on the women in the culture of its day. And oftentimes in our modern culture, religion has kept a thumb on females in our culture. But if you look at Jesus, while many of the religious people of his day depowered women, Jesus empowered women. While many of the women of the day needed their husband to take care of the sacrifices for them, while many of the women of the day, their husband had to represent them before God, Jesus comes to a woman here at the well. The woman comes to him, and Jesus encounters her. This is mind-blowing, stereotype busting Jesus. I love that Jesus doesn't seem afraid to encounter anyone, even one who the religious people in his day would have said should have never been encountered. Because this woman was not a number in people, she was a person who mattered to God. The same is true for you. Jesus asks her, "Will you give me a drink?" Now, I think that the woman might have been a little shocked because, first off, Jesus was Jewish and she was Samaritan. His disciples had gone into the town to buy food, and so Jesus is having a personal interaction with her. And what we're going to find is that this woman has a history of having personal interactions with men in such a way that those personal interactions with men are actually part of the reason that she's there at noon, because she couldn't go there in the morning. She would have been left to just go in the middle of the afternoon at the time where the less desirable went to get water, where the lowly thought of went to get water. And while the Pharisees had been gossiping about Jesus, trust me when I say this woman was probably the topic of gossip at the well that morning before she came that afternoon. And maybe she went to the well in the afternoon because the talk of her in the morning would be excruciating, soul hurting and soul crushing. Jesus' disciples had gone into town to buy food. The Samaritan woman said to him, "You're a Jew, and I'm a Samaritan woman. How can you ask me for a drink?" Because Jews do not associate with Samaritans. I think this woman thinks she's so dirty that she has to protect Jesus from what people might think about him. She worries that her reputation and her history will rub off on him. Religious people are so often afraid that if they interact with someone who doesn't think like them, act like them, or look like them, that somehow whatever it is that's unholy or impure that they're around will rub off on them. And Jesus does not seem to be concerned, but this woman is concerned that she can't approach him because of her past. And Jesus answered her, "If you knew the gift of God and who it is that's asking you for a drink, you would have asked him and he would have given you living water." Now, the reality of this woman's life is she probably had to go daily and get water. I mean, there's nothing like being thirsty, and our bodies need water. And the response of thirst is a desperate need for water. There was a physical need that this woman had to need water, and she was just there taking care of her physical need. Much of her life had been about taking care of her physical needs. Unbeknownst to her, she's having an encounter with the Son of God here. She was hoping to encounter no one because she thought no one wanted to encounter her, but she encountered someone because she was a someone to Jesus. And Jesus tells her, if you knew the gift of God, what he's saying is, if you knew me, if you knew who was asking you for a drink, you would see that things are different than they appear. Because if you asked me for a drink, I would give you a water you wouldn't have to look for every day. Isn't it interesting how we try to fill our soul needs with physical things? Maybe it's an addiction that you've got. Maybe it's a little more food. Maybe you're down and low, and so you got to take that Dairy Queen trip, and you eat the Dairy Queen and you're like, oh, that was great. And then like 10 minutes later, you're like, why do I always do this to myself? Or maybe you post for 3 months on Facebook about how you're worthy of a good man. You're worthy of a good mate, and yet you find yourself settling for another bad relationship that leaves you more empty and more damaged. It appears that may have been the story of this woman, and what Jesus is saying to her is, I'm trying to encounter you here so you see that your soul needs will never be met by your physical things. That relationship that you want, that water that you have to have, you'll need something again. But I'm here encountering you because I have something that will quench what you're looking for. Sir, the woman said, you have nothing to draw water with, and the well is deep. First off, you're Jewish. You're not going to drink from my cup. Why would you drink from what I am carrying from? I'm a Jewish woman. I'm a Samaritan woman, and you're a Jewish rabbi. And then she asks, where can you give this living water? She asks this question that appears to be kind of a stupid question, but the reality is it's not that dense, because the woman knows what it's like to search for something that never can seem to be filled. And most of us, if we're honest, we know too that the things of this world may give us some happiness for a moment, but they never leave our soul filled. Most of us know that you can cry in the new truck or the old truck. Most of us know that with a full meal and a belly full and a pocket full of cash, you can be happy for a moment or miserable still. And she asked a legitimate question. Where can I find a water that I don't have to search for over and over again? I'm tired of being thirsty from a body standpoint, but I'm even more tired of being thirsty in my soul. And she asked Jesus a question, are you greater than our father Jacob, who gave us this well and drank from it himself, as did also his sons and his livestock? She's trying to figure out, who is this rabbi who would talk to me? And Jesus doesn't seem to get mad at her. He just continues to explain. So if you happen to be kicking the tires of a life of faith, trying to figure out who is this Jesus, you need to know that he's a patient God who's willing to answer your questions. Jesus answered. That in itself is a huge point. That Jesus answers the questions of the broken and the seeking. And he says, everyone who drinks this water will be thirsty again. But whoever drinks the water I give will never thirst. For some of you, your greatest hurt is the thing in your life that is missing. You know it's missing. And you think maybe somebody can fill it or something can fill it. And you even occasionally feel like your thirst gets quenched when you get what you want, but then you find that you're still not content. You think that next job will give me some value, but then you still hear the voice telling you that you're worthless, or that next marriage will somehow give me an identity and change what I've done and where I've been, and people will forget who I've been and start to see who I'm with. And but then you find yourself still feeling empty. There's a God-sized hole in our hearts that we try to fill with so many things, but only one thing will complete the puzzle. We try so many things. We try to put pieces. I used to get frustrated when my kids were little and they would do puzzles and they would take a piece and they would like try to push it in where it didn't belong, until I realized that I've spent much of my life trying to fill a hole that I just didn't even have the right piece for. Jesus says, whoever drinks this water that I give them, will never thirst. Indeed, the water I give them will become in them a spring of water welling up to eternal life. What Jesus is saying is, not only is what I'm offering to give you something that will help you become complete, it's something that will then overflow into the lives of the people around you. So that you won't be relying on what you take from others, but that others will be gaining from what you give. The woman said to him, "Sir, give me this water, so I won't get thirsty and have to keep coming here to draw water." See, I think water was a problem for this woman. It was a problem because she always had to come at a hot time of day. It was a daily reminder of her failures in her past. And she was thirsty to solve this problem. he told her, go call your husband and come back. Now, for the woman, this must have felt like an arrow to her heart because she had a history of husbands. And at this point, she had no husband. In this day and age, her value and her redeemability would have been determined by her relationship with a man who could provide what it took to give her value. And she says, I have no husband. One more reminder that she didn't have what it took. I love that while this woman is in a sincere moment of struggle, in a sincere moment of doubt, in a reminder of once more how she did not add up to the standards of her day, that Jesus doesn't say, okay, then I'm done with you. He looks at her and he says, you're right when you say you have no husband. The fact is, you've had 5 husbands. Now, this woman had probably been a little secretive about how she had lived her life. And even though the gossip happened, Jesus is looking her straight in the face and knowing everything about her past. She had never met him before, and yet he knew what she had done. He knew what she had done that would try to fill the hole in her heart. She once again respectfully responds to Jesus and says, Sir, I can see that you're a prophet. Now, this encounter with Jesus has her thinking he's a prophet, and really he's the Son of God. And she expects that the prophet is going to speak truth to her, but she doesn't yet realize the prophet is not just speaking truth to her, he's actually speaking life into her. She says, our ancestors worshipped on this mountain, but you Jews claim that the place where we must worship is in Jerusalem. She felt hopeless that all of the prophecy in the past would include her. It would include Jewish people. It would include the people who had followed the rules, but it certainly wouldn't include a woman who couldn't keep a relationship going with the kind of man who could bring her redemption. Jesus says, woman, believe me. Jesus didn't say, woman, you have to find a husband who believes me. Because he was personally interacting with her. He said, a time is coming when you will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. The thing that had divided the people was where they worshiped. And Jesus is saying, all of you have missed the point. But lady, I'm here with you right now, and I'm sharing the point with you. I've reached into your world, and I'm telling you of something better. You Samaritans worship what you don't know, and we worship what we do know. But your salvation is from the Jews. Yet a time is coming, and now has come, when the true worshipers will worship the Father in the Spirit and in truth. You see, the Samaritans would go one place and worship Jesus, and the Jews would go another to worship Jesus. This woman would ultimately worship Jesus because he met her where she was. Neither the Samaritans or the Jews would have believed that this well was a place of worship. It was a place of toil. He said, those are the kind of worshipers the Father seeks. God is spirit, and his worshipers must worship in the spirit and in truth. He's offering to be her place of worship wherever she goes. The woman said, I know that Messiah is coming, and when he comes, he'll explain everything to us. I love this little phrase because this woman has, despite everything she's gone through, she's heard a lot about the Messiah. And she states something very prophetically, but she doesn't yet realize that what she speaks prophetically is actually happening to her right now. When he comes, he'll explain everything to us. All the questions that she might have asked over the years about her place when the Messiah comes. What do I do? I'm a woman. What do I do? I'm a woman who's sinned. I'm a woman with a history. I'm a woman with a past. Jesus doesn't seem fazed by her questions. He patiently continues to respond. And Jesus then looks at her and declares, I'm the one speaking to you. I am He. What a powerfully intimate moment. You see, the intimacy that this woman had shared with these other men, it had probably been cheapened over time. She was probably considered someone who was easy service, easily used. Probably someone to whom men looked down on and women gossiped about. But in this moment of confusion, in the midst of her history, in the midst of her past, Jesus announces to her that He's the Messiah. And all the people over worshiping on the mountains, and the Samaritans worshiping on their place, were missing Him. But she was receiving Him. And the disciples, they come back. I don't know if they brought back bagels or fish or, some cream cheese on their bagels or whatever it was that they were going to eat that day. And the disciples, these are guys who have already been following Jesus. Here's a woman who's just met Him, and then there are these guys around, and they have their own ideas about who Jesus is going to be. And it says, just then His disciples returned and were surprised to find Him talking with a woman. But no one asked, what do you want, or why are you talking to her? See, I think the disciples were making their own internal judgments about what Jesus was doing here. Hey, don't you know that's the chick that's been married 5 times? Hey, don't you know there's a reason why she's here at noon instead of morning? What respectable woman would come here in the afternoon? Jesus doesn't respond to what He knows they're thinking. I love that Jesus knows what's going on in their minds, but He leaves her water jar. The woman leaves her water jar. There's no story that she goes ahead and gets her water and takes it back. All of a sudden, this thing she has to have every day doesn't seem so important. This thing that fills her physical needs doesn't seem so important because she's had an interaction that's filled her soul. The woman went back to town and said to the people, come and see a man who told me everything I ever did. Could this be the Messiah? They came out of the town and made their way toward Him. So now Jesus has interacted with the Samaritan woman, but He's now interacting with the Samaritan people. You see, the Jewish people would have referred to the Samaritans as those people, that woman. But Jesus saw them as people. She doesn't yet know that He's the Messiah. Even though He's told her, she still has some doubts about whether the Messiah can do what He claims He can do. But she goes, she comes and sees. She then brings other people with her to see. And meanwhile, His disciples urged Him, Rabbi, eat something. But He said to them, I have food to eat that you know nothing about. And Jesus is telling them, I've just told this woman that I'm the water that will fill her soul. And while you guys are still worried about all these earthly things, I rely on the Father for my needs. His disciples said to each other, could someone have brought Him food? They don't get it. They've been following Him, but they don't get it yet. Maybe they haven't been desperate enough. Maybe they just aren't sure yet about Him. Maybe they're taking a lot of identity in following Him, but they really don't yet know Him. And so they think about the practical needs, the earthly needs. Jesus said, my food is to do the will of Him who sent me and to finish this work. Look, the thing that fills my soul is meeting people like this. You know, the people you call those people. That's what fills my soul. And by the way, maybe for those of us who call ourselves Christians, maybe our real soul need isn't met when we get that physical thing. Maybe it's met when we do what we were made to do. Jesus was made to come and save the world through his sinless life, death, and resurrection on the cross. And we were made to share it with the world. And maybe when we begin to share this Jesus who changes things, maybe those physical needs won't be so significant. Maybe those soul needs will actually be met. Don't you have a saying, it's still 4 months until harvest? I tell you, open your eyes and look at the fields that are ripe for harvest. Jesus is like, you guys are all looking for a Messiah. You're looking for somebody to come. You're looking for somebody to come and build a kingdom, and the kingdom is here. Look, there's this woman, and she's here, and she's thirsty, and you have the water with you. You have Jesus, you have me with you right now. And I'm the thing that can fill her soul, and I'm the thing that can fill the broken soul. But Jesus was also here because he knew the God-sized hole in the hearts of the men who were following would never be full by the next meal they found. He said, even now the one who reaps draws a wage, and the harvest a crop for eternal life, so that the sower and reaper may be glad together. Thus the saying, one sows and another reaps, is true. I sent you to reap what you have not worked for. Others have done the hard work, and you have reaped the benefits of their labor. And then the scripture tells us many of the Samaritans, many of the people who were considered unworthy and off base from that town, they heard what happened to the woman, and they believed if he would accept her, maybe he would also have us. The woman went home. She said, he told me everything I've ever done. So when the Samaritans came to him, so here they are, the Samaritans are now Jesus is not just talking to one Samaritan in a private place. He's bringing himself to the Samaritans. The Samaritans are coming to him. And rather than Jesus being like, look, you guys can't be seen around me, Jesus stays with them for 2 days. And because of his words, many more became believers. And they said to the woman, we no longer just believe because of what you said. Now we have heard for ourselves. See, they had an encounter with Jesus. And we know that this man really is the Savior of the world. 4 lessons I want you to take away from today. 4 lessons to take away from this encounter with Jesus. Jesus alone is the solution to the void in our heart. Remember that day this week when you felt disgruntled? Remember that moment or that returning moment that happens to you where you feel emptiness and you think, oh man, I got to get a different job. Or I've got to get a bigger bank account, or I've got to find someone else. That moment where you left home frustrated with your spouse and you thought about the person who's been paying you a little too much attention. And you thought, if I had a spouse like that, I'd be happy. If I had a wallet like that, if I had a truck like that, I'd be happy. And sometimes we even get what we've been wanting and find out that still we've been lacking. I wonder how many times this woman at the well had thought, oh, there's this new man and he's really handsome. There's this new man and he's really respected. There's this new man and he seems to really care for me. Only to find out that something inside of her was never fulfilled. Only to find out that she was still thirsty again tomorrow. Jesus alone is the solution to your thirst. You know, I have this never-ending battle with trying to be healthy. I love food. I have to have food to live. And then sometimes I crave certain kinds of foods that aren't what my body actually needs. And I find myself craving things that I know are bad for me. But then I eat them and feel like trash. You see, the reality is Jesus is what we need. And he's the only solution to that that void that keeps coming back. The reality is oftentimes we get what we want, and then what we want actually hurts us more. Jesus is not fazed by our sin. If you're watching this morning and you've got that secret sin, if you have a history that you just wouldn't dare share because religious people wouldn't understand, if you're a religious person hung up in a sin and you would never dare ask for help because then people would judge you, the answer to your problem is Jesus. Jesus is not fazed by your sin. He's not afraid of your sin. Jesus isn't afraid to be seen with you. Religious people might be afraid. Jesus is not afraid of you. He's the light, and when he goes where there's darkness, he lights it up. Number 3, Jesus is the only Savior. I read a statistic this week that 30% of the people who claim to believe that Jesus Christ is Lord do not believe that he's the only way to the Father. Jesus very clearly here states what he believed and what he thought and what is truth, that the only answer to the hunger in our heart is him. It's not our behavior. It's not our list of things that we check off and do. He is the Savior. He's the one that saves us from ourselves. He's the one that saves us from our wrong. He's the one that saves us from the thirst that won't go away. Number 4, an encounter with Jesus will always overflow into the lives of others. This woman met Jesus because he encountered her. And she experienced change because of that encounter. And that change rolled out to her people. Once you've encountered Jesus, once you've experienced what Jesus can do for the thirst in your soul, you can't help but tell others that there's a well that will fill their needs. Have you encountered Jesus in this personal way? Maybe you've encountered Jesus in like this big public setting, or maybe you had a worship experience or a moment where you feel like you had an encounter with God. But I want you to know that God wants to encounter you personally. You. With whatever your history is, with whatever your past is. Jesus came for people like you. Jesus came for people who were broken, because broken are the only kind of people there are. And we don't become the sons of God, we don't become the children of God by being better. We become the children of God by his adoption. And Jesus adopted this woman who no one would have thought was worthy. See, God's goodness and grace to people is not because they deserve it. It's because that's the kind of God he is. If you've been avoiding him and avoiding his people, know that he would love to encounter you and transform your life. I love you, but the God of heavens and the earth loved you so much that he would send this story to remind you that he wants a relationship with you. He does not want to remind you of your brokenness. He wants to give you wholeness. I love you, Bethel. Have a great week.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Are you ready to take your next step? We would love to hear from you. You can send an email to hello@bethel.us. You can send us a message on Facebook, or you can let us know in the Bethel app. And speaking of the Bethel app, take a moment, if you haven't already, to go to your app store and search Bethel Putco to download our app. There's all kinds of great resources in the app. You can listen to messages, you can view the messages for Sunday morning, and you can also fill out a digital Connect card. You can do that today and each week to let us know that you're tuning in. You can also find some great information about our Bethel Kids Ministry and our Be the One student ministries. Also in the app, you can give. It's one of 3 ways you can give: with online giving at bethel.us/give, in our app, Bethel Putco, or through text. Hey, thanks again for joining us. We hope you have a great day and know that you are loved.